I'm Professor N.J. Wolf, the Library Director here at FIT, and I want to thank all of you for coming to tonight's final 2013 Love Your Library event. As some of you, if you've attended other events, know that the library puts on a series of Love Your Library events every year, and this is the final event. And I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here tonight. I now want to introduce the person that coordinated the event, which is Yana Duda, who is our head of technology, resource manager, and resource services at the library. And she and her team work very diligently to provide the library with technology, but also to push us ahead with our PrintFX graphic lab operations. And what we're hoping to do is to really develop a fab lab here at FIT. Yana is also an adjunct professor in the photography department. So I'm going to turn it over to Yana, and again, our thanks for you coming this evening.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm glad you're here. And tonight's lecture is called Textiles from Code to Couture, and is being presented by Michael Schmidt and Francis Bitonti. Unfortunately, Mr. Bitonti was not able to make it here tonight because of travel complications, but we are going to Skype him in, so he still will be participating in the event tonight. Hopefully the Skyping will go well. So without any further delay, I'm going to give you Michael Schmidt.
I'm Michael Schmidt. It's exciting for me to be here in from Los Angeles. We have Francis in the background over there. We'll bring him in a little bit. I thought I would talk to you tonight a little bit about this, of course, but I would also like to tell you about how we got there. Give you some history about who I am as a designer and my work. And in doing so, I'd like to tell you initially really more than who I am. I'd like to tell you a bit about who I'm not. I am not a particularly skilled draftsman. I am not an excellent draper. I'm not a very good sketch artist. I am not even a particularly good sewer. I tell you these things because as a self-taught artist who did not have the benefit of higher education, as most of you here have had, I would like for you to appreciate what you have at your disposal in this fabulous institution, because I didn't have that, and there isn't a day goes by that I don't wish that I had those skills. But as a self-taught person, I have found ways to make it through, and have tried to be as inventive as I could be, and I'd like to take you on a little bit of that journey with me today. I came to New York City in 1983 from Kansas City, Missouri. I was looking for something to do. I was a little punk rock kid, no particular ambition. I had an interest in music, had an interest in clothing, but no real skills. I thought I would get by initially by any way that you get by in New York City. I did a silly bit of modeling and that sort of thing, but and what I really wanted to do was work with my hands. And I started by making jewelry and things that from found objects. I would find things on Canal Street, 14th Street, so forth, and learn to piece things together, and I found that I had a bit of a knack for this. I then started selling to stores, and I began researching various techniques, and I came across the technique for creating chainmail. It's something that I immediately responded to somehow. I saw this material, and I hope that you someday have the experience of finding a material that you really gravitate towards, and you say, "This is it for me." Somehow, this spoke to me in a way that nothing else had, and the challenge for me of adapting unusual materials to the body became a motif throughout my work. I ended up making a bit of jewelry, and then I made a dress. I started creating clothing out of this material. The dress that I first made ended up on the cover of Details magazine, which was the height of downtown. It was the Bible of downtown New York City in the 80s. And This dress wound up in the window of a store in Soho called Diane B. It's long since gone. It was replaced by Comme des Garçons. But this dress was in the window one day, and Cher walked by and saw the dress and went into the store and asked, "Who made this dress, and can you put me in touch with this person?" And they said no. And they wanted her to have to go through them to get to me. But I fortunately had a friend who worked in the store who slipped her my number, and sure enough, Cher called me. So I started working with Cher, and our relationship continues to this day, but it's been about 25, 26 years. We've done a number of things together. Some of these date back, these are all obviously quite 80s. I'd like to say perhaps not obviously. I'd like to think they don't date quite as much. Well, this probably does. But, and these are more recent things. In fact, this is the cover of her latest single. But we've had a very fruitful and wonderful, loving relationship for a very long time. She then began giving my work away as gifts to her rock and roll friends. And that began my somewhat rambunctious career in rock and roll and touring. Here, this is all mostly mid-'80s. Here I am with John Bon Jovi, Steven Tyler, Ozzy Osbourne, Skid Row. I did all of these heavy metal bands, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. It was. I'm surprised I'm here to tell the story, to be honest with you, but it was great fun and a lot of stories that you really are not old enough to hear. I also worked with, this was really one of the highlights for me, working with Tina Turner, who was a very good friend, of course, with Cher. Herb Ritz the photographer asked me to create a gown, a dress for her. This is a Swarovski crystal linked mesh piece. She said she didn't want to wear this dress. She said, I've done that. I've done that for 40 years. I don't need another mesh dress. And when she saw the dress, she tried it on, and it became the centerfold of her album cover. She loved it. And we worked together quite a lot. Here you see a piece for Vanity Fair. It's a little dark, it's hard to see, but this is coins all linked together in a sort of a mesh-like material. And then she wanted to wear this on tour, but it was actually louder than she was. So that didn't work for stage, but it was great for photographs. Here, this is a piece that was tortoiseshell guitar picks done in scales. So again, you see this sort of motif that carries throughout most of my work, which is adapting these unusual materials, metals, plastic, glass, crystal, whatever, what have you, to the body, and hopefully creating something that's memorable. Because these are not streetwear; these are stage clothing. You must remember. So, one of my favorite people in the world to work with, and my very favorite band is Blondie, and so for me, working with Deborah Harry has been really one of the great highlights of my life. We actually lived together for a number of years. She's a great friend. Just a variety of things that we've done together over the years. I'm trying to run through these because there's quite a lot of them. This is a razor blade gown, floor length, over 3,000 razor blades, all hand dulled on sandpaper. Creating a gown. Here you see it being stitched in a shingled effect, and it's very serpentine when she walks. This dress actually ended up being displayed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute. These are a variety of other things from the 80s and 90s. We have Courtney Love. I've done a few tours with Janet Jackson, the great Grace Jones. Wonderful, wonderful Dolly. This is Eartha Kitt. I hope you have the benefit of knowing who she is. If not, I suggest you you find out she's an incredible, she's no longer with us, but she's an astonishing talent. Joan Jett, Naomi Campbell, there's Halle Berry. But, so these are all just my girls. This is a piece that I thought I like to see process. I think young people like to see process. This is a snakeskin, a python pattern replicated in metal scales. Here you see how I was able to take this pattern and just graphically represent it into, break it down into its basic components. You lay out the scales like this. It's very, extremely laborious, and then they're all stitched down. And then the end result you have here. This is Fergie of the Black Eyed Peas. This was for American Idol. And this took about 3 months to do, and hopefully I'll never do that again. Other things for Fergie. This is a touring piece. Sometimes, I wanted to show this because sometimes, the individual that you're working for, at least when I work in entertainment, it's not about so much the individual, it's about the room. Sometimes you design for the audience. This was something created for the Kids' Choice Awards last year, and it's made out of Legos. And the kids really loved it, so that was fun. Lady Gaga is someone who I worked with for a while. This was a shoot. Well, this was all photographs from the paparazzi video, which was one of her first large videos. This is a photograph from David LaChapelle wheelchair that we did for her, and I did a number of pieces for that video. The next thing we did was this crazy day. I had made her a gown out of a woven 8mm film, but as it turns out, there was no set. David LaChapelle didn't feel that there was a set that was appropriate for the gown, so he did have this one set of all these bubbles that he really wanted to shoot something in, and he said, but there was nothing for her to wear that was right for it. So I said, okay, give me 15 minutes, and I looked around the studio, and I found all these little spheres, and I drilled them out, stitched them together, and Scotch taped them to her body. And that ended up, of course, on the cover of Rolling Stone. So you never know. There were other shots of this filled with naked bodies, and it was quite something. Here are my sudsy boots. Rihanna's another contemporary that we've worked with. When I say we, I mean I have a very, very talented, skilled group of craftsmen who work with me. I have a talented crew of 5 people that work, metalsmiths and seamstresses who work with me in my studio. I also have part-time people and a number of interns. So together, when I say we, when I say me, I really mean we, because I have a great, great group of people. These are some images these are finger spiculum, hand-hammered, that we do for her video that she did with Coldplay. This is a little metal mesh mini dress I did in collaboration with Jeremy Scott, who's also from Kansas City, from one town over from where I grew up. Various touring things you see here. At one point, she asked me to do a pair of shorts, and that was the only directive. And I said, okay, well, what are the most iconic pair of shorts? That would be, I guess, a pair of Daisy Dukes. So I found a pair of Daisy Dukes of cut-off denim shorts that I liked. I took them apart and photographed them. I then developed a technique for printing, laser printing onto metal mesh. And then we unlinked them, relinked them into shorts, as you see here, and that ended up on the cover of Rolling Stone. So I enjoy the process of developing new techniques. Every project is different for me, which is an advantage in the sort of work that I do because it's never boring. But it's always challenging. The deadlines are impossible. You're never given a directive. You're rarely even given a fitting. This had no fitting. I knew her body, but I didn't really. Oftentimes, you just simply don't know if these things will work or not until the day of the shoot. Now, Dita Von Teese has been a friend of mine for quite a number of years. I knew her husband, Marilyn Manson, prior to knowing her, but she got me in the divorce. And she and I are still great friends to this day. I'm still friends with him, but I'm crazy about her. This is a pair of Swarovski crystal lensed glasses that I made her for. I just gave them to her for Christmas, and she ended up wearing them in this photograph, which will be in her new beauty book that's coming out very soon. I'd like to tell you that this photograph is unretouched. I mean, she really is this flawless. It's shocking. These are some things that I've done with her. This is her most opulent number. It's called her Opium Den number. I assume you know who Dita is. She's the great burlesque icon. We did, this is a crystalled fan, hundreds of thousands of crystals, dragons on both sides, a number of accoutrements. This is an opium pipe. This headdress is a woven human hair with bugle beaded cherry blossoms and crystal chopsticks and beaded, tassels, and it's just nuts. But she's extraordinary, and if you've never had the opportunity to see her live, I suggest you take it. It's really, really an amazing show. This is Britney Spears' new video that just came out last week. This was another one that almost killed us. Absolutely no time, but it's difficult to see again in this. I'm afraid, but it's a metal mesh motorcycle capelet that's embellished with tattered mesh and crystal and spikes and the whole 9 yards. So Madonna I have worked with for since 1995. This being the first thing that we did together, which was a video for the song Fever. And then I've done her last 4 tours. These are just a variety of pieces of tours. And this is an editorial from, you may recall, from W Magazine, all styled by the great Ariane Phillips. I work a lot with stylists. Stylists really, when I started out with Cher and Tina and all the bands, there were no such things as stylists. It was just me and the artist alone in a room. One of my favorite memories was being alone in a room with Tina Turner and having her try on my work and her going through all of the Tina moves. If you know Tina and you know River Deep, Mountain High, you know the moves I'm talking about. That is a chilling moment. So now it's about collaboration, and I work with some of the best stylists. I work with the greatest stylists in the world, really. I mean, I'm fortunate in that regard, that they trust me and come to me with ideas, and we try and make them real. The entree that Madonna made on her latest tour, this is how she comes out on stage. She comes out in a kneeling pose and then pulls a machine gun and shoots through the vestibule, wearing this crown and veil that we created. The crown is brass and gold, 24-karat gold plated and encrusted in crystal. The problem with this particular project was that she wanted to take this off and throw it across the stage. And when she throws it, I mean she throws it. And I begged her, can't you just drop it on a pillow somewhere? But she was like, no, it's got to be a dramatic flourish, and it's got to, and so we devised these techniques to make it hollow. It had to be lightweight, but it also obviously had to be very durable. And the crystals couldn't fall off, and it couldn't damage every time. And it was quite a challenge. But you see some of the labor that goes into these, hopefully seemingly effortless things, but it was quite something to do. We did over 300 pieces for this latest tour. A variety of, everything from her guitar straps and shoes and T-shirts. These are all metal mesh T-shirts. We made hundreds of these for her dancers. This is all metal mesh with crystal mesh MDNA woven into it. There's a gun holster. There was just a crazy amount of things. There was 4 acts in this tour, the largest tour she's ever done. The final act was all designed by myself and Ariane, and this was a metal mesh suit of armor. The directive was coming from Madonna was Joan of Arc meets Shaolin monks. Do with that what you may. So this is what we arrived at, and it's a chainmail. This is all crystal chainmail collar and suit of armor. But it's all, these things have to move. They're stage wear. These are all created on foam, and they're structurally reinforced, of course, but they're and they have to last for hundreds of shows. So touring clothing is a very different kind of designing. And plus she dances, and it's a huge amount of physical labor that goes into wearing these things, changing in and out of them. I mean, it's exhausting, and I really applaud her ability to, take on these challenges for herself. These are some collaborations with Jeremy Scott. We often collaborate with other designers. These are some metal mesh pieces. This is a tie-dyed metal mesh T-shirt. I like this idea. This is a gunny sack burlap bag. Just various things. Jeremy will come to me with an idea, and we'll try and make it happen. Same with Chrome Hearts, a luxury goods company that does rock and roll sort of clothing, and I've done work with them for 12 years. In fact, I'm their only external designer. This is a piece that's diamond paved in sterling silver. This was done for Cher. And I've done hundreds of different pieces of jewelry. This is a black leather teddy bear encased in a sterling silver sheath of mesh. We've had a really wonderful relationship for a long time, and I really love working with them. Sometimes, however, you like to get away from the body. You like to do something a bit different scale. This is a curtain I was asked to do for the Ace Hotel in Palm Springs. They wanted a macrame curtain, and I said, I don't really want to do a macrame curtain, just 70s macrame. So I did. I incorporated some Japanese bondage techniques, rope bondage techniques, as well as some old shipping knots and all kinds of things. This was great fun to do. This was a bamboo sculpture for a restaurant, Simon at the Palms. It's at the Palms Casino in Las Vegas. This is something for Whole Foods in Newport Beach, a rope sculpture. It's balls. These balls are called monkey's fists. These are ropes. These are knots that have been tied in the ends of ropes for sailors to be able to throw a rope across the bow of a ship or to shore. So we made these grape-like structures out of these. It's kind of hard to see in this photograph, but anyway, we also do quite a bit of jewelry. This is the metal mesh material crystal mesh material that Swarovski does. That is we enjoy working with. It's every crystal has prongs that has to be worked by hand. This material is about $6,000 a square yard, but we really enjoy working with it, and the results, I think, speak for themselves. This is a set of cuffs that we did for Dita. This is a pair of spiked pieces that were on the cover of W, and this is some pieces that were on W as well, on Nicole Kidman. The new collection that we're working on now is all sterling silver and gold and diamond paved. This is all paved in diamonds. So, now, that tells you a little bit about who I am and where I came from. What I'd like to now go into with you is to explain to you what we're looking at as far as the dress. And I want to touch briefly on the technology, I think by now in this room, that this technology is capable of largely doing anything the mind can dream of. You can design and create not only the musical instruments that people play, but the actual concert halls in which they will be played. This is a musical pavilion printed out of concrete. Here you see it being constructed. It's astonishing. Due to the fact that body scanning has come such a long way, we are now able to get extraordinary detail, which we needed when we did Dita's dress. This is a body scan, and you can see how incredibly detailed you can get. This can actually be, you can design for this form and then have it printed out, and it will fit spectacularly well. In addition to that, we can get so much detail that we can actually print things that become part of the body. Here you see a number of pieces that were actually able to be incorporated into the physical structure of the body itself. Prostheses. This is a unique cast, custom made for a guy who broke his arm. This is a jaw, you can see, and this is a piece that was done for a child that was born with a condition having no fingers. And the problem with prostheses, especially for children, is that, of course, they outgrow them so quickly, and it becomes cost prohibitive for their parents often. And with this technology, they're able to update these materials, update these as the child grows, the technology grows, and the prostheses can grow with them. It's fascinating stuff. Of course, as you develop things for the body, the next obvious thing that everyone asks is, well, what can we do with fashion? Here we see some examples of some extraordinary things created. These are obviously by the great Iris van Herpen. I'm sure you're familiar with her. This is a piece from 2011. Extraordinary. This is printed in nylon, much like our dress. And there simply is no other way this could be created. It's lightweight. It's rigid. It's sculptural in nature. But it's extraordinary to look at. Here, she's now experimenting with more fluid materials. This is a silicone and latex mixture. So she's moving into the areas now of flexibility and as far as working with the body and the body's natural movements. Here are some shoes. For some reason, shoes seem to be the go-to item that people want to experiment with for 3D printing. These are Zaha Hadid. The architect did these, and these as well. These are, Nike put these out, which are custom 3D printed cleats for athletes designed specifically to enhance their unique performance on the field. So it's remarkable the amount of tailoring that one can do. When you scan the body and you have the body's physical measurements, what you can do to actually enhance the physical experience of a person using these items. The problem with 3D printing, as far as utilizing it for clothing and fashion, is that it's a rigid, inherently rigid material. They are now beginning to print in materials that are more flexible, but still what we have here are examples of solid pieces of printing. These are one piece of printing, but it's an attempt to introduce the idea of malleability, which is necessary to have a successful garment. Up here you see this is a print where this clearish material is joined by the black lines that you see as a rubberized material, creating what's called a living hinge. And this creates a very fluid material that's all printed in one piece. And beautiful to look at. This is an example of this is a solid print. Not an articulated piece, but a solid piece of printing. But these are connected with spring-like joints that give it obvious flexibility. This is an attempt at printing fur, and it does have a very fur-like feel to it. Unique attempt at that. And here we, of course, have some knitting, but printed in one solid piece. So here we see examples of people trying to realize in these rigid materials that we're limited to now in printing, trying to achieve malleability. For me, 3D printing won't get interesting for clothing until we are able to print in more organic materials, materials that possess the qualities that a piece of clothing has that we all recognize as being a successful piece of clothing, a t-shirt or a pair of jeans or whatever. Once we're able to print in materials that are breathable, dyeable, flexible, that have all of these qualities that we require as human beings to wear as a successful piece of clothing, we're not quite there yet. We're getting there. But at the moment, there are people that are experimenting in printing organic materials. Here you see pasta being printed. This is sugar. This is sugar. Astonishingly beautiful. And of course, here we have chocolate. Very, very interesting. Here we have something that I find really quite fascinating. This is a company called Emerging Objects out of Berkeley, California. They're doing very, very interesting things with printing organic materials. This is wood. They're printing in, this is a wood sawdust, essentially, printed with a binder, a kind of a fluid glue that when it's printed, it even gives you the patterning not unlike wood would have. But this is a residual effect of the printing process itself. I believe this is pecan wood, and this is maple. Beautiful things, very, very strong, translucent. They have a lot of the properties of sort of veneer, and yet are recyclable, and they're extremely inexpensive to print. And they just show you the forays that we're making into printing organic materials. Here you see paper. This is ground paper mixed with a binder and able to be printed in the solid. These two I find particularly intriguing. This is salt. This is a building block made for a building in the Middle East. Salt water was actually piped in from the sea. It was then extruded by a 3D printer, and as the water evaporated, it created a solid salt structure of which buildings can be made. This is, again, a binder is combined, and it's extremely durable. Now we see the true future of 3D printing. This is skin cells, leather being grown in a lab. This is 3D printed cells that they are then able to grow. We know that they're able to grow tissue for burn victims. We know that they're able to do these things. But this is an actual attempt at creating leather for the use of fashion. This is done by a company called Modern Meadows in Columbia, Missouri. Very, very interesting stuff. So we're getting there. But for now, we're limited to certain things like nylon, ceramics. There are certain things we can print in that, let me tell you the backstory about this dress. I was asked by the Ace Hotel here in New York for Fashion Week back in March to create a gown. They were having a symposium on 3D printing and its potential for the fashion industry. And they said, would you like to create a 3D printed gown? Well, I have known about this technology for 20 years, but I've been waiting for it to evolve to a place where it could be, we could really attempt to do something interesting with it. And so I jumped on the chance. They introduced me to Shapeways, the company that's actually based out in Long Island City. They are a company that has the ability to print anything you want. You send them your designs, and they have a number of materials that they can print in, and they will print your designs. They even have an online community which will sell them for you. And so they do this really sort of interesting stuff. So I thought, okay, this could be cool. So Shapeways introduced me to Francis Bitonti. Are you there, Francis?
I am.
Hello, say hello to everyone.
Am I just voice?
Yes, you're just voice at the moment. I'm about to go into this the slides, but I just want to make sure you're still there. These are some of Francis's pieces you see right here. I was immediately intrigued by Francis's work. this stool. You can see. You want to talk a little bit about these pieces?
Sure. So, my work, we had made a joke, me and Michael, I think halfway through our collaboration, we realized that we were on two completely different ends of the spectrum. I was totally interested in virtual things, and Michael was totally fascinated with physical things. So it was a perfect team in many ways.
Right.
Much of my work is really about exploring computing. I write simple computer programs that make these forms, and then I look for applications and I look for ways to materialize them. So it's very much a kind of reverse process. It's a reverse engineering, taking the digital and trying to manifest it in a way that's physical. So these chairs and this table, they're really explorations in software and ways of manipulating data. The table in the upper right is actually generated from animations that were generated by simulations of flocking birds that were run through MRI software that your doctor uses when you get an MRI. The chair is actually also an agent-based system where discrete points are able to grab each other's neighbors with these lines. I mean, I won't go into the whole all the details, but essentially it's an exploration in computing in order to create aesthetics and a new kind of aesthetics. And the bike rack on the bottom that was my studio's first project. It was a bicycle rack that we did for the New York City Department of Transportation. I was making these things that I didn't really know how to build, and obviously wasn't getting commissions. But for some reason, the DOT thought I could make this bike rack, and having no other option, I 3D printed it, and that was the beginning of my work with 3D printing.
I love this bike rack. I mean, this is incredible.
Thank you, Michael.
So, when Francis and I met, and it should be noted that Francis is in New York and I'm in Los Angeles, so we actually did this entire process over Skype. We never met until the night the dress was revealed. We had worked together for 4 months and never met. But we worked together fabulously well. I sent him my sketches for the gown, and I was inspired by Dita's style. You know, she has a very unique and distinct flair for 30s Hollywood glamour, and I wanted to honor that, but create something for her that could not be made any other way through extremely futuristic means. And I thought the juxtaposition of the two might be interesting. So I began thinking, what am I going to do? I mean, you know, what? This is a challenge. I mean, when you have the ability to create literally anything you can think of, what do you do? I mean, this is a challenge. So I started to think about, it's got to be beautiful. And it occurred to me that there was this formula, Fibonacci's golden ratio, which is the quantification of beauty rendered through mathematical means. I won't go into it. I'm sure you've heard of it. But it results in, graphically, a spiral. So I decided, okay, let me play around with this. So I took this spiral and I quite literally adapted it to the body in a way that would give me something that I could work with. This is the golden ratio based on his mathematical formula from the 12th century. This mathematical formula is also said to quantify dimensions of such things as the human ear, the shells of a conch shell, the spiraling of the galaxies. Listen, there is a lot of, questioning about that, but there are some unique properties to this formula which I found very, very interesting. So I simply adapted them in the most rudimentary way. For me, if anything, it was almost an inside joke, but I thought maybe we could create something interesting that only we would know about. So this is how we developed the net pattern, and we then evolved from there. I sent Francis these sketches and ideas, and he was able to start creating this spiraling effect. So here you see us building the spiral. This is transpiring in his computer in New York. And here you see our first, attempts at rendering. I gave him Dita's measurements, and he was able to create a virtual version of her body in his computer. He then started, this evolved, and I began to tell him, okay, pull this, push this, let's, create this shape here, and you want to go into a little bit about this, Francis?
Sure. Yeah. So we created this model of Dita in the computer. It's a little bit like Weird Science, the movie. And what we did was we designed the entire dress in 3D. So we created the form of the dress. This was like draping on a virtual dress form. But the thing that was very different was that the computer describes these shapes with these sort of discrete components called polygons. And what we did was we made sure that we built the model in such a way that we would structure the mesh. We would make the computer build the dress in a way that would carry the design intent of these spirals over into the structure of the surface. So here what you see is that we've actually manipulated the computer's natural way of working in order to fit the design objective, which was to have these spirals wrapping around the body, which was making this like kind of Chinese finger trap-like structure we saw in the early sketches.
These are some different shoulder treatments that we were playing around with, just some different textural maps that we found interesting, and I thought you might like to see. But here we decided on basic. This is when we really started to get somewhere. Each tailored again to that specific part of her musculature. This is the code that Francis wrote and sent to Shapeways. They then began to print and print and print. And this is the process by which 3D printing takes place. They're laying down here a layer of nylon powder, and the laser comes along and hardens a layer, and layer upon layer, it's slowly built up. They take out a block of powder from the printer and slowly take away the excess, and you see the shoulder structure starting to emerge. They then vacuum away all of the excess dust.
Now, this was a really perfect technology for this because each of those articulated hinges had to be self-supported while it was being built. And a lot of 3D printing technologies would make complex support scaffolding that we wouldn't be able to remove without breaking the structure. And this material is also dyeable. So it was perfect in every way to pull this off.
Right. Due to size limitations in the printer, you're only able to print something about yay big. So they had to print this dress in 17 separate sections. But all of these sections are obviously fully malleable, as you could see before. They sent me these bizarre-looking shapes, and I had no idea what these were or if they were going to fit together. Francis kindly made me this little map. And so here you see each individual piece, and it was up to us to try and figure out how to put this together. Now, mind you, we had no idea that this was going to, in fact, fit together, if it was going to fit her, what was going to happen. This had never been done before, this sort of articulation built in like this. So we were a little out of our league, but we slowly got it pieced together. Here you see us doing some of the finishing work. We dyed the nylon pieces. We tried many different things. We ultimately found that RIT dye worked the best, oddly enough. But that wasn't really enough. That was just mostly to dye the internal structures, the mechanisms, in case you saw them. But I really wanted a more beautiful surfacing, so we lacquered the surface. Then here you see us building the corsetry that supports the entire scaffolding of the upper body. And here we are draping the mesh onto the corset. The corset is the only piece that's not, printed. This had to be made specifically to her body. She can get her waist down to about 18 inches. This particular dress is about 22. That's how people often ask me, how does she get in it? It laces up the back like a corset. Then once we had the entire thing put together, it came time for the finishing. Embellishing is a great part of what I do in my work. I work a lot with Swarovski crystal. They donated the crystal for me to do this dress. It ended up being over 50,000 crystals, probably more, in a jet hematite to give it just a very subtle sheen. Every single one, obviously, needing to be hand placed. Now, most people see this dress and they've only seen photographs. They have often said to me that it's clearly a work of Photoshop. There's no way she can move. It's simply, it can't be that it is fully articulated. But here you can see. And there you have it. The dress itself will be on display as of the 16th at the Museum of Arts and Design uptown in Columbus Circle. They're doing a really fabulous exhibit for 8 months called Materializing the Post-Digital, all about digital means of production and design across platforms, automotive design, building design, clothing design, everything. It's going to be really incredible. So I'm very flattered to have the dress on display. They do have discounts for students, and some days are free to get in. I would suggest you check it out, not just because of the dress, but because it's really an extraordinary piece of work. Great. Students, $12, Thursdays and Friday nights, 6 to 9, pay what you wish. So, and we actually have some of these, which give you a little more detail. They'll be out on the table out front. So, there you have it. I would like to thank you all very, very much for coming today. I hope you got a kick out of seeing how the dress was made and a little bit about the process, about how we work. Even some of us, those of us who are self-taught but are trying to do interesting things, and we'll see what the next project brings us. So thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, let's find Francis, shall we? Let's see here. Everyone, this is Francis Bitonti. Can you see the audience? No, you can probably only see me.
I hear them. It sounds like a great crowd.
Okay. No, we had some extra, there's a little mechanism on the inside of each joint. I had extras printed that we could then manipulate by hand to get in there. So it's all joined the same way, but those 17 sections had to be done manually. But they're all done by the same means, so it's seamless all the way around. That I've worn? Well, the obvious, I go way back to like the early punk rock days, so Vivienne Westwood and all of those things, designers that are part of cultural movements, Comme des Garçons, all the innovators. I'm interested in ideas, not so much the end product. I used to wear very flashy, I guess I still do, but I was a lot flashier in my youth. But McQueen, of course, is a big influence, and I like people who push the boundaries and are not interested in following trends. I think that my own work, being that, I don't do fashion. I do entertainment, and I'm not really, the reason I don't do fashion is because I'm not interested in working seasonally. The idea for me that fashion is outdated, in the planned obsolescence of fashion is disturbing to me, and I'm not interested in the rat race of trying to constantly come up with a new collection every 6 months. That's not interesting to me. So ironically, it's exactly the same way with technology. You have technological innovation. Every year it's a new iPhone. Every year it's a new, this, that. But and so technology and fashion are actually a great deal alike, and they're as far as tools, they can serve one another. But I'm not really interested in fashion per se. I'm more interested in, again, adapting unusual materials, creating something visually interesting, hopefully exciting for the audience. That sort of thing. I'm sorry. Well, it's about 11 pounds. It's actually quite light. But yes, you see the flexibility built into the joints. When she moves, is that what you mean? You mean, is the material itself flexible? No, it's nylon. The material is hard. It's nylon. That's why I was trying to get away from the structural things that had been created in fashion through 3D printing prior to this gown. What we were trying to introduce was a new way of looking at this technology in creating a fluidity, something that could adapt to the body and move with it, something that was not simply a structural piece placed on the body. But basically I was trying to make the technology sexy, and that's the only way to do it. And who better to do it on, right? It's stitched in. Yes, it's sewn in. Yeah, it's tacked, very, very delicately all around. You'd never know it. You'd never see it. But it's very delicately. The corsetry wasn't difficult because it was, they're specifically both tailored to her form. So it was just basically a layering over that. And we had only one fitting with her. So it all worked remarkably well, I must say. No one was more surprised than me.
Or me.
Well, every job is different for me. Everything is a challenge, and for me, I don't really have a technique. I don't have a style. I think if you're able to recognize my work, I've failed, because I'm not interested in projecting my ideas as a designer, my identity as a designer, onto my client. I'm interested in embellishing my client. I'm interested in taking a persona. What?
I sneeze.
Is he yawning or something behind me?
No, it was a sneeze.
Oh, bless you. But what I mean when I say that is I'm not interested in self-aggrandizement as a designer. I'm interested in illuminating and glorifying a person on a stage. Or we also take the same techniques and use them for our jewelry, that anyone can wear that. But that doesn't have a unique style that's unique to me, I think. I tend to approach things I prefer to remain a bit anonymous in my work. I don't know if that really makes sense. I hope that answers your question.
There's a question, the woman in the back.
Would I do the dress out of another material? We thought about it. In fact, Francis can speak to that. Let's get him in there about using ABS as opposed to
sure.
nylon.
The issue with using the ABS would have been possible. You have to extrude ABS. You have to use a fused deposition modeling printing. You would need multi-material printer. You'd have to print the articulations with a water-soluble scaffold.
He's cutting out. You're cutting out.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, say that again.
You'd have to print the material, for one, with a water-soluble scaffolding, so you would need an FDM printer that could print two materials, because you'd have to support the material as it's being built. So you can overcome that, but the biggest problem is, for one, the resolution's not as high as it was on the nylon. So we got a much smoother finish out of the machine, which reduced the finishing time. It would have been even more difficult to finish the gown had we printed it in ABS with the technology available right now.
We actually wanted to initially chrome the dress. That was the initial hope, but the material we couldn't get we couldn't get it smooth enough. I have abilities to chrome things that are not, metal, but we couldn't sand and smooth the material enough. We thought ABS might actually work for that purpose because you can chrome ABS, but
with ABS, it would have been impossible because of the layers of material would have been too thick, and the articulations are so small, you'd have to sand them all down. It would have taken forever.
In the end, I think we're more fortunate that we didn't, because it's the dress itself doesn't really need a great deal of embellishment because the shape and the graphic quality of it is so unusual that it doesn't need a lot of finishing. You mean about the potential for creating in organic materials like cotton and binders? Yes. The way I envision it is it would end up being a sort of felt-like quality. We don't know this yet because it's never been done. So we're actually working in developing some of these things. But again, we don't know yet what's going to happen. There's no reason to make a fabric as we know it, because we do that already. But we would be interested in being able to create things which have the properties of clothing as we know them. Again, the breathability, maybe perhaps recyclability, dyeability, all of these things that we need. We could do perhaps, we could improve on cotton in some crazy way. But, this is down the road. But, again, we're obviously getting there, but don't know. No, there are many, many types of 3D printing. What we use is called selective laser sintering, which is a technique where it builds by layer and layer and layer through laser hardening. There's photopolymerization. There's, Francis can tell you, he's the king of this.
No, you're doing great. You're right. Your photopolymerization, there's diffuse deposition modeling, there's laser sintering,
there's the molecular, you can print on a molecular level, too. So what's that called?
Oh, electro beam. God, it's escaping me right now.
Yeah. This was the process that worked for our particular needs. The material, the nylon that we used, is strong, it's lightweight, and it's dyeable. And all of these were parameters that must be met for what we were trying to do. But now we're working with companies that are doing flexible materials. And so we're able to do things that we couldn't even do 6 months ago. This dress was designed in November and finished in March. So this was 4 months. It took me a month and a half to design the thing. Francis took, 2-3 weeks to write the code. The printers...
Sleepless.
Shapeways had to move their entire production overseas and shut down all of their printers to make this dress by the deadline that we had given them, so we could have it for Fashion Week. And then came all of the embellishing, all of the hand finishing, all of the putting it all together. It was an enormous undertaking. But, that's what we do. So... Well, we do. We're experimenting with some things right now, and I obviously have a number of girls who are interested in this technique and have the stage upon which to wear them. So we're in the process of working out something right now that's extremely exciting, and I can't tell you what it is, but it's going to be good.
It's amazing technology.
What's that? No, I could get into a lot of trouble if I did. Yeah. I am, but I am in Los Angeles, and but
I'm in New York.
Francis could probably use some interns. Yeah, he could use some help. So, yeah. I don't think so. Look, the loom has been around since, really, we've made fabric. I mean, fabric is, as we know it, you can't improve upon a woven fabric. I mean, we've done it. It works well. It suits our needs. It's 3D printing, as we know it now, is suited primarily for these sorts of fantastical ideas that you can't create in any other way. In the future, there would be no need to replace an already fully functioning, way of doing things. What it could be used to do is create new shapes, push the boundaries of what is acceptable as far as, shapes. And when we start to develop technologies that incorporate electronics into clothing and all of these things, which are happening, 3D printing could fall in line with those. These are all things that are coming together over the next 10, 15, 20 years. We'll see enormous strides in all of this. But I don't see the point in replacing, I mean, how are you going to improve on a T-shirt? I mean, but we can do imaginative things that can't be done any other way. So people want both. Oh, good question.
Program?
Yes, programming.
Oh, it's a lot. Everything. That dress, we used Maya, Rhino processing, and ZBrush. It takes... all these different softwares are good at different things, and there is no software designed to do this. So it's really you develop a lot of techniques, and I've developed a lot of techniques over the years to realize these kinds of geometries and to make them able to be fabricated. So there's no... I can't tell you what to buy. There's not really a...
He actually
it's not really a
had to
solution
alter...
there. Get everything.
I mean, you had to alter the code and write your own programs to do the geometries, to render these...
I always tell students you want to learn... you want to learn it in the most abstract sense. You don't want to try to learn Maya because Maya might not be here in a couple of years. You want to understand how the computer renders form. And programming is a great way into that. But if you're not a programmer, I mean, the software keeps getting more and more powerful. But if you understand it on a conceptual level, you can do anything and you'll keep evolving with the technology, and that's where you want to be.
Well, I mean, all of what you see, really, because each piece is unique to that part of the body, there is no way that a human being... I mean, yes, physically, I suppose you could have created, over the course of several years, it would have taken to make that by hand. I mean, we've done extremely complex things, but why? You know what I mean? I'm sorry, again? Yes. Well, what I mean is that the beauty of this technology is that I could tailor this dress specifically to her rather, spectacular form in a way that I couldn't do any other way. I mean, you would have to create an understructure and you would just basically bead. It would be a beaded dress if you were going to, try and make that. You would stitch those little guys on there. But that's not the point of the gown. The gown there's nothing under there, except for the corset. The dress is a fabric. That was our challenge, was to create a fabric printed that was malleable and fluid and had a sensuality built into it that would work with her musculature as she walks. She's a dancer, so she has the ability to work, that fluid fabric very gracefully. But that's all built into it. There's a little, mechanism within each of the thousands of cross points, and it's like a machine. That dress is more machine than...
The dress is deceptively...
Yes. Right. It was all created at one time, and the shoulders certainly couldn't have been made any other way, and So it's basically two dresses in one. It's got the shoulder structure, which is hard and soars off the body, but then it's got this fluidity that's also built into it, but all created at the same time, out of the same material, through the same printing process, through the same, the articulation, again, is built. Those joints are printed in there. They're not going anywhere. They're literally, the joints have a little mechanism on the inside that is printed at the same time, layer by layer, and it creates a fabric. And it comes, as you saw, out of the printer, fully flexible and adaptable to the body.
If you look at the photos that Michael had of the parts laid out on the floor, you'll notice they don't lay flat. It's not a flat textile. This is a three-dimensional textile that has a kind of tendency to curl or bend in a certain direction. It's not a fabric in the traditional sense. Each piece of that fabric is specifically designed for the way the body is shaped at the point at which it's placed.
Right.
So it's a very different way of thinking about a textile in relation to a garment.
Right. Oh, a back image of the dress. No, I don't have any images of the back, but it's actually remarkably similar. And when it's laced closed, you cannot see the closing of the gown. You can see that if you see it in the museum, you'll, I'm sure, be able to walk around it, and you can see that it comes together really beautifully. It drapes really beautifully down the back, and then underneath there's a lacing, and it looks like that from the back too. It's not hideously ugly from the back or anything. Thank God. You could print that dress in one piece if you had a large enough printer. The printers themselves, while they're enormous, they're the size of 2 refrigerators, they can still only print anything. They're limited in size. Had to break the dress down into 17 sections that would, believe me, I wish they could have printed the whole thing in one piece. But, eventually, of course, they will be able to do that. But we had to divide it up into sections that would fit together like a puzzle. Well, there's a lot of seams. What you saw in the image with all the colored blocks, the color-blocked image, those were the individual parts as they were joined together. So there are seams in there, but you'll never see them. Thank you.